Coming up on Arirang News, just a few days after South Korea let up on social distancing measures in the capital region, the number of new local cases of COVID-19 is back above 100, a worrying number of them untraceable. South Korea's Unification minister calls on North Korea to reopen communications with Seoul. Visiting the border, he also proposes that the two sides re-engage in exchanges. And the World Trade Organization rules that the Trump administration's tariffs on China are illegal. Washington says it's just another sign that the WTO isn't up to dealing with what it sees as China's abuses. It's 5 o'clock p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea has seen a number of new cases from cluster infections linked to churches and to one of the largest hospitals in Seoul. The number of new daily cases occurring locally has risen back above 100 today, about a fourth of them untraceable. Choi Won-jong reports.
The number of local infections in South Korea has jumped back into triple digits after dropping below 100 for 3 days in a row. As of Wednesday, the nation reported 113 new cases. Out of them, 105 were local infections. This brings the total number of cases to 22,504. No additional deaths were reported, keeping the death toll at 367. Since the 3rd of September, the number of new cases has shown a downward trend, but hasn't quite fallen into double digits yet. Due to the lingering cases of cluster infection and untraceable cases, the health authorities have banned political rallies in central Seoul on the National Foundation Day on October 3rd.
If the rallies still continue, the government will respond in accordance with laws and principles to protect lives and public safety.
The number of untraceable cases is also increasing across the nation. Out of the 2,055 cases from the September 3rd to September 16th, 522 cases are still under investigation. More than 1 in 4 new cases are still unable to be traced. Health authorities are concerned that people moving around the country over the upcoming Chuseok holiday could lead to more spikes. On Tuesday, a man who was confirmed with the COVID-19 was caught while traveling by KTX train from Seoul, intentionally violating self-isolation. Choi Won-jong, Arirang News.
South Korea has been ranked 3rd on a list of the 100 safest countries in the world for COVID-19. The ranking is by a Hong Kong think tank called the Deep Knowledge Group in a report cited by Forbes. In 3rd place, South Korea comes after Germany and New Zealand. Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi shared the Forbes article on Facebook Tuesday and said it shows South Korea's excellent quarantine capabilities. The report assessed 250 countries and territories not only on how hard they've been hit by the pandemic, but also their political will to take quarantine measures and their society's acceptance of them. It also re-evaluated the cooperation between central and local governments and the strength of the country's medical systems. Around a week ago, trials of AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine candidate were put on hold due to what was suspected to be a serious adverse reaction. While that trial is back up and running, Pfizer says its vaccine candidate has produced mild side effects. Kim Do-yeon reports.
It's been a week since AstraZeneca reported adverse reactions during COVID-19 vaccine trial, and Pfizer also reported mild to moderate side effects from the vaccine it is trialing. According to Pfizer's executives, over 12,000 participants have received a second dose. Over 29,000 volunteers have already been chosen, and the goal is to have 44,000, while the company is closely analyzing the safety and tolerability of the vaccine. During the study, an independent data monitoring committee could recommend a pause at any time. While AstraZeneca's resumed its trials on Monday, the news still affected people worldwide. Some of Johnson & Johnson's volunteers worried about the side effects have quit. However, the company claimed the situation is under control.
Still, it hasn't affected us much because a number of the volunteers, particularly in the 18 to 55 age group, have left us with enough reserve volunteers.
The firm's Belgian unit began its phase 2 of trials in Spain this week. The company aims to test 60,000 people globally in phase 3 and include people from all walks of life. In the meantime, China could have a vaccine ready for the public as early as November, according to an official with the Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention. She said the current phase 3 of the clinical trials were proceeding smoothly, and 3 of the country's vaccines have already been offered to essential workers under an emergency use program launched in July. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
South Korea's Unification Minister Lee In-young is calling on North Korea to return to talks and restore communications channels with Seoul. His remarks came this morning during his first visit to the inter-Korean truce village of Panmunjom. Lee urged the North to respond and make an effort to swiftly carry out the 2018 Pyongyang Joint Declaration. He also suggested holding small reunions of separated families at Panmunjom. He added that suspended tours to the DMZ could also resume once the pandemic calms down. The World Trade Organization has ruled that the Trump administration's tariffs on China enacted in 2018 are against the law. It says the U.S. did not sufficiently prove that the tariffs are justified. Washington, though, says the ruling is a sign that the WTO itself is not able to stop what the U.S. sees as China's harmful technology practices. Kim Yo-sun reports.
The World Trade Organization has ruled that Washington's tariffs imposed a couple of years ago on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods are illegal. Tuesday's ruling by the WTO's dispute settlement body is the first time it has ruled against tariffs imposed by the Trump administration. The panel explained that the U.S. violated international trade rules by slapping tariffs on Chinese goods. It also ruled against Washington's argument that Beijing has wrongly engaged in practices harmful to America's interests on a range of issues, such as intellectual property theft and technology transfer. The comment immediately drew criticism from U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer, who said Washington had presented, quote, extensive evidence of China's intellectual property breaches, and the WTO failed to address the issue. He added that the Trump administration will not let Beijing use the WTO to take advantage of American workers, businesses, and farmers. Beijing's Commerce Ministry said the ruling was, quote, objective and fair, calling for Washington to respect it. Under WTO rules, the U.S. has 60 days to appeal. But it remains to be seen whether the WTO can give out its final verdict, as its appellate body cannot function currently as it does not have a quorum to operate, as the U.S. has blocked the appointment of its members. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Yang Jun-seok, Professor of Economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Professor Yang, good to have you back on.
Happy to be here.
Well, stocks in New York were higher last night. Data coming out on the U.S. and Chinese economies. Korean stocks today were down, then up, then down again. What's the story in the markets?
Okay, well, for the U.S. market, after a fairly bad couple of weeks, this week, Monday and Tuesday, they seem to be recovering. The recovery is led by the tech stocks, which was responsible for the fall a couple of weeks ago. But it hasn't really been a very dynamic recovery. Dow is somewhat level. It is not rising very much. It's not falling very much. S&P and NASDAQ are rising. But I think the market basically is waiting for what the Fed has to say at the end of the week. They're going to have a summary of economic projections. They're also going to give some indications on what the near future monetary policy is going to be like. They already stated that they will maintain low interest rate for an extended period of time, but I think the market is looking for how much additional liquidity the Fed is willing to put into the market. That's going to affect the stock market in the short term and the medium term, and it may quite possibly lead to even more difference between what's happening in the real economy and what's happening in the stock market. But I think basically the U.S. stock market, as well as other global stock market, is basically taking a wait-and-see attitude. That's reflected somewhat in the European stocks. Some indices like Euro 50 and FTSE is up for the week. The DAX and CAC are basically level, though all these indices happen to be down today. They just started trading and they started lower. Nikkei was down yesterday, but it's recovered today a little bit. Shanghai was up on Monday and Tuesday, but it went down a little bit. And that's similar to what's happening in Kospi and Kosdaq. Went up on Monday and Tuesday, went down today. For today, individuals bought and institutions sold. Institutions selling is a bit unusual, but again, it seems to be reflecting what's the wait-and-see attitude, though the good economic performance from China may have helped the market a little bit yesterday and before yesterday. China's industrial production was up 5.6%, which was higher than expected, and retail sales were also up 0.5%.
Now, today we have news. Japan has a new Prime Minister, Yoshihide Suga. He's going to continue with the policies of Shinzo Abe or go even further in that direction. What economic policies do you see coming under the Suga administration?
Okay, well, unlike Abe or unlike some of the competitors that Yoshihide Suga had for the prime ministership, he does not have a faction of his own. So he's going to have to depend on the Abe faction to continue to back him, which means that he'll continue the Abenomics as well as Abe's foreign policy most likely. His motto, at least until the next election, is going to be "Don't rock the boat." So that means continuing easy money policy with cooperation from the Bank of Korea, and that will also help the current the high-valued yen, the United States, because they have promised easy money, low interest rate. The dollar is depreciating in value, which means that Japanese yen is appreciating in value. So continuing easy money policy will hopefully get the yen depreciating. Fiscal policy, it's questionable what position Suga will take. He has presented a support for increasing consumption tax in the past, but recently he has been going back from that position. But it is known that he cares more about government budget, government surplus than Abe was. And then in terms of structural reforms, he seems to be a stronger free market believer than Abe was. And there has been some signals that he may deal with regional banks because there are too many regional banks in Japan. He may lower corporate taxes further, and there are some signals that he may deal with Social Security and labor law reform in those areas. But I don't think he's going to do any type of major reforms, at least not until the next election, general election takes place.
Well, we're almost out of time, Professor, but before we go, what about relations with South Korea?
Well, Suga has, while in the old days he was somewhat pro-Korean, recently he has taken the same position as Abe. So if Korea does go ahead and sell off the confiscated assets from Japanese steel companies, we can expect a strong response, and we could expect continuing standoff, continuing stalemate if the situation stays as is currently.
All right, we'll have to leave it there for today. Professor, thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
South Korea's grocery prices in August rose by the third highest amount out of 22 OECD countries, due in part to a poor harvest due to the unusual weather this summer. According to the OECD on Wednesday, South Korea's food prices jumped 6.6% on year. The longest ever monsoon and a series of typhoons hit farms across the country, causing prices of fresh food like cabbage and pumpkins to soar. Prices of sweet potatoes rose by the most in around 30 years. Apple has unveiled its latest lineup of iPads and a new Apple Watch. It's hoping they'll be a big hit now in the middle of the pandemic when people are spending a lot more time in front of their screens. Kim Jae-hee reports.
Apple revealed its latest gadgets and services to the world on Tuesday, including the Apple Watch Series 6, a new iPad Air, and the 8th generation iPad. Apple did not announce any new iPhones during the virtual event, but its Apple Watch series and iPads are earning rave reviews at a time when non-face-to-face communication and fitness are being emphasized because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The new Apple Watch Series 6 will be available from $399. It can monitor blood oxygen right from your wrist and give the user an overall picture of their heart and lung health.
The new health sensor in Series 6 shines red and infrared light onto your wrist and measures the amount of light reflected back. Advanced algorithms use this data to calculate the color of your blood, which indicates the amount of oxygen present.
Apple's new iPad Air featuring a 10.9-inch display will be available in the U.S. starting next month, retailing from $599. Apple says the device's A14 Bionic chip gives it a massive boost in performance.
So the iPad Air with the A14 is probably the biggest announcement from this because it brings the whole concept of processing power that realistically had only been in something like high-level laptops and desktops to something as small as an iPad.
The new 10.2-inch 8th generation iPad is equipped with a 40% faster CPU and provides twice as much graphics power. Also being released in the U.S. in October, it will retail from $329 for regular consumers and $299 for customers in the education sector. Apple also rolled out a new virtual fitness service and a bundle of all its subscriptions to cater to customers working at home during the pandemic. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
And that does it for this newscast. Thank you for watching.